Michael Darrah, stay by the chairs.
I work claims. People came to me because the system was slow.
The case says you charge veterans money to move Bennett's that were already owed.
I told them people inside could help things done faster.
Michael Darrah operated without oversight for years as a VA benefits representative in Providence, Rhode Island. The veterans depending on him to process what they had already earned were about to find out exactly what that trust had cost them.
You called it gift cards. Prosecutors called it bribery and extortion.
You are making this wait room sound like every veteran who sat here was my target.
He was a veteran himself, in a sense. 13 years on the Brockton police force, retired on a partial disability pension, and a second career sitting across the desk from men and women who had served this country and were now waiting for the benefits they had already earned. Within 6 months, federal agents from the FBI and the VA Office of Inspector General would seize his work computer, his cell phone, and bank records documenting nearly $30,000 in cash payments from the people he was supposed to be helping. 6 federal counts, 3 bribery, 1 extortion, 1 illegal gratuity, 1 witness tampering, and 1 veteran facing foreclosure on the only house he owned, who paid Michael Darrah $5,000 to do the job taxpayers were already paying him to do. Pop quiz before we go any further. How many times do you think a public servant has to look a veteran in the eye and ask for cash before somebody finally files the right report? Drop your number in the comments. And if you're not subscribed yet, this is the channel for cases the local news barely touched. We don't let these stories disappear. Michael Joseph Darrah was born in Brockton, Massachusetts in 1978. His father worked the floor at the General Dynamics shipyard in Quincy. His mother kept the books at a small insurance agency on Main Street. Brockton in the late 70s and early 80s was a city of factories that were already closing, and a boxing legacy that was already nostalgic. The shoe industry that had built the place was gone. What replaced it mostly was unemployment, opioids, and a police department that grew leaner every fiscal year, while the calls for service grew louder. Michael grew up in a triple-decker on Pleasant Street with 2 older brothers and a younger sister. His report cards from Brockton High School in the mid-90s described him as cooperative, reliable, and physically capable. He played outside linebacker on a football team that won very little. He worked summers loading trucks at the Stop and Shop distribution center off Route 24 for $8.10 an hour. He graduated in 1996 without honors and without a plan beyond getting out of his parents' house. He spent 2 years at Massasoit Community College taking criminal justice classes at night while working as a security guard at the South Shore Plaza in Braintree. In 2001, he applied to the Massachusetts State Police Academy and was rejected on the medical screening. He applied to Boston PD and was rejected on the written exam. He applied to Brockton PD, his hometown department, and in February of 2002, he started his 16-week training class at the Plymouth Police Academy. He graduated in May. His academy evaluation called him a steady recruit with good instincts and adequate physical conditioning. He was sworn in on June 14, 2002, and assigned to the Brockton Police Department's Patrol Division covering Ward 3, the neighborhood he had grown up in. For the first 8 years, he was, by every account that survives in his personnel file, a competent and unremarkable patrol officer. He responded to domestic disturbances on Warren Avenue. He worked traffic details at the Westgate Mall. He made arrests for shoplifting and disorderly conduct and the occasional larceny from a motor vehicle. His annual reviews from 2003 through 2008 describe him as punctual, shows initiative on routine calls, and maintains professional demeanor under pressure. He was promoted once to senior patrolman in 2007. He married a paralegal named Karen Sullivan in 2005 and bought a 3-bedroom raised ranch in Taunton, 20 miles south of Brockton, in 2007 for $248,000 on a 30-year mortgage. 2 daughters followed, the oldest in 2008, the younger in 2010. The Darrahs were, by every external measure, a stable working-class New England family. Soccer practice on Saturdays at Memorial Park. Dunkin' coffee runs on the way to the early shift. Christmas decorations up the weekend after Thanksgiving and down by the second weekend in January. But the second daughter was born with a congenital heart defect that required 2 surgeries before her first birthday at Boston Children's Hospital. The bills, even with the city of Brockton's health plan, ran into the high 6 figures. Karen left her paralegal job to be home full-time with the recovery and the follow-up appointments. The household income contracted. The mortgage on Taunton did not. By 2012, the Darrahs were carrying credit card debt in the high 5 figures and a second mortgage on the house. In the summer of 2013, Michael Darrah tore a hamstring chasing a suspect through a parking lot off Main Street. The injury did not heal correctly. He went on light duty for 9 months, sitting at a desk in the records division processing accident reports and stamping incident summaries. He gained 28 pounds. He started a process toward early retirement on a partial disability pension. In April of 2015, after 13 years on the job, Officer Michael Darrah turned in his badge and his service weapon and walked out of the Brockton Police Department for the last time. He was 36 years old. His pension paid roughly $31,000 a year. His mortgage required $1,900 a month. He needed a second career, and he needed it fast. In the summer of 2015, Michael Darrah applied for a federal civil service position at the United States Department of Veterans Affairs Regional Office at 380 Westminster Street in Providence, Rhode Island. He was a hiring preference candidate. His combined state and federal law enforcement background scored him near the top of the eligibility list. In October, he was offered a position as a Veterans Service Representative, VSR, at the GS-7 salary grade, with a clear path to GS-11 within 4 years. A Veterans Service Representative is the human being on the other side of the disability claim. When an Army medic who lost partial hearing to an IED blast in Anbar Province files for service-connected compensation, a VSR is the one who reads the medical evidence, reviews the service treatment records, evaluates the rating criteria under 38 CFR Part 4, and decides what percentage rating the veteran will receive. 10%, 30, 70, 100. Each percentage corresponds to a dollar amount paid for life. The difference between a 30% rating and a 70% rating for a veteran with a spouse and 1 dependent child is roughly $1,200 a month, every month, for the rest of his life. That decision sits, in the first instance, on the desk of one VSR. The Providence Regional Office processes claims for veterans across all 6 New England states. On any given workday, more than 200 VSRs and rating veteran service representatives sit at modular workstations on 4 floors, working out of the Veterans Benefits Management System, the VA's digital case file platform. Each VSR carries an active inventory of between 60 and 140 pending claims. The backlog is permanent. Veterans wait an average of 131 days for an initial decision. For complex claims involving traumatic brain injury, post-traumatic stress disorder, or military sexual trauma, the wait can stretch beyond 2 years. The system runs on trust. Trust that the VSR reading the file is reading it fairly. Trust that the rating decision reflects the medical evidence and not the mood of the person who wrote it. Trust that, when a veteran is told over the phone that his claim is being expedited, it is actually being expedited. Michael Darrah was hired into that system on October 19th, 2015. He completed the 8-week challenge training program in Baltimore. He returned to Providence in January of 2016 and was assigned to a cubicle on the 3rd floor, station number 314, processing dependency and disability claims for veterans living primarily in Rhode Island and southeastern Massachusetts. Within 3 years, he was promoted to GS-9. Within 5, he was a senior VSR with mentor responsibilities for new hires. His performance reviews described him as detail-oriented, shows aptitude for complex rating analyses, and maintains rapport with claimants under difficult circumstances. He was, on paper, exactly the kind of public servant the VA had been built to employ. He sat between veterans and the benefits they were owed, and the federal government paid him $83,000 a year to make sure that gate moved when it was supposed to move. The veterans on the other side of that gate had no way of knowing how much discretion sat in his hands. They knew their claims were slow. They knew the phone tree was a nightmare. They knew the contract examiners kept rescheduling. What they did not know was that a single VSR, working a single station, could quietly accelerate a file out of the development queue and put it in front of a rater in under a week if he wanted to. The first time Michael Darrah asked a veteran for money, as far as federal investigators were ever able to determine, was sometime in the fall of 2020. The veteran was a 41-year-old former Army specialist named Daniel Ortiz, who had served 2 deployments to Iraq with the 1st Cavalry Division and had been waiting 14 months on a disability claim for hearing loss and tinnitus. Ortiz had been calling the VA's 800 number for 6 months. He had filed an inquiry routing and information system request. He had contacted his congressman's veterans liaison. His claim was stuck in the development phase, waiting on a compensation and pension examination that kept getting rescheduled. He was working 2 jobs, overnight at the Amazon warehouse in Fall River, and weekends as a security guard at a methadone clinic in Pawtucket, because the medical bills from his daughter's emergency appendectomy had wiped out his savings. Ortiz drove up to Providence on a Tuesday morning in late October to walk into the regional office in person. The intake clerk pulled his file and told him a VSR would be down to speak with him. The VSR was Michael Darrah. Darrah sat with Ortiz in one of the small consultation rooms off the lobby for almost an hour. He went through the file. He explained the bottleneck. And then, according to the affidavit Ortiz would eventually give to federal investigators, Darrah lowered his voice and said something that did not appear on any official transcript. He told Ortiz the contract examiner backlog was a problem he could fix. He said there were people inside the office, schedulers, raters, supervisors, who could move a file forward if they had a reason to. He said the reason did not have to be a big one. A gift card here, a thank you there. $3,385, distributed appropriately to the right people, and Ortiz could expect his C&P exam to be scheduled within 30 days and a rating decision within 90. Ortiz did not have $3,385. He had 2 jobs and a daughter and a wife who was working part-time at a daycare. He drove home to Fall River and thought about it for a week. Then he called his brother-in-law, who agreed to lend him the money against the eventual back pay he would receive when the claim was approved. He brought the cash in a manila envelope to a Dunkin' Donuts on Branch Avenue in Providence, a quarter mile from the VA office. Darrah met him in the parking lot. The envelope went from one front seat to the other. Darrah did not count it. He said he would be in touch. 31 days later, Ortiz's C&P exam was scheduled. 84 days after that, his disability rating came back at 50%. Back pay totaled just over $18,000. The system, Darrah seemed to be saying, worked exactly the way he had described it. The second veteran, a Marine Corps Reserve gunnery sergeant we will call Raymond Whitcomb, came to Darrah through a referral. Ortiz had not exactly recommended Darrah to his friends, but he had not exactly stayed quiet either. By the spring of 2021, a handful of veterans in the Providence and southeastern Massachusetts area had heard, through the kind of conversation that happens in VFW parking lots and union halls, that there was a VSR at the regional office who, for the right number, could make a stuck claim move. Whitcomb's claim was for chronic post-traumatic stress disorder stemming from his service in Helmand Province in 2010. He had been rated at 30% on a previous claim and was seeking an increase to 70% based on new psychiatric evidence from a private doctor in Worcester. The difference between 30 and 70 was real money, roughly $1,400 a month, for life. Darrah's price was $16,566. Whitcomb paid in 3 installments over 6 weeks. His rating increase came through in August. The pattern was established. The price varied with the size of the claim. The cover story, every single time, was the same. The money was not for Darrah. The money was for the gift cards. The gift cards were for the other VA employees, the schedulers, the raters, the supervisors, who were doing the actual work of pushing the claim through. Darrah was just the messenger. Darrah was just the guy who knew where the bottlenecks lived and who could be persuaded to clear them. There were no other VA employees. There were no gift cards. There was only Michael Darrah, sitting at Station 314 on the third floor of the regional office, processing the claims himself, exactly as the federal government was already paying him to do. Before we get into how this finally caught up with him, if you've made it this far, you already know this channel doesn't soften these stories. Subscribe and stick around. The veteran who paid him $5,000 while losing his house is coming up next, and the way the investigation finally cracked open is something you have to hear. The veteran's name, for our purposes, was Thomas Bellamy. Tommy, to the people who knew him, 63 years old, Army Reserves, 82nd Sustainment Brigade, with a deployment to Bosnia in 1996 and another to Kuwait in 2003. After his service, he had spent 22 years driving an 18-wheeler for a beverage distributor out of Cranston, Rhode Island, until a back injury in 2017 forced him onto Social Security disability and a partial VA rating. He had filed for an increase on his service-connected back claim in 2021. The claim had stalled. By the spring of 2022, Tommy Bellamy was 8 months behind on his mortgage on a small ranch house in Coventry, Rhode Island, and the bank had filed paperwork to begin foreclosure proceedings. He was 63 years old, divorced for 15 years, and his only family within driving distance was his daughter, a 38-year-old hospice nurse named Karen Bellamy, who lived in West Warwick. Karen Bellamy was the one who started making the calls on her father's behalf. She filed congressional inquiries through Senator Reid's office. She filed Freedom of Information Act requests for the status of the claim. She drove him to the Providence regional office in May of 2022 for an in-person inquiry. The VSR who came down to the lobby that afternoon was Michael Darrah. According to Karen Bellamy's later sworn testimony, Darrah spent 45 minutes in the consultation room with her and her father. He pulled up the file on his laptop. He explained that the C&P examination had been requested 4 times and rescheduled 3. He explained that the medical evidence in the file was, in his professional opinion, sufficient for an increase, but that the file needed to be reviewed by a rater who, quote, understood the urgency. Karen told him about the foreclosure. She told him her father was going to lose the house in November if something did not change. She told him she was a hospice nurse and her father was a veteran, and the system was supposed to work for people in exactly this situation. She brought a folder with the foreclosure notice and the mortgage statements and the hospital records, and she laid all of it out on the table. Darrah listened. He nodded in the right places. And then he made his pitch. He could move the file. He could get it in front of the right rater. He could get the rating done before the foreclosure auction in November. But the gift cards, he reminded her, the supervisor, the scheduler, the rater, those people did not work for free. The number, he told Karen Bellamy in the regional office parking lot afterward, was $2,700 to start. She paid it in cash in a CVS parking lot off Quaker Lane in West Warwick the following Tuesday. Her father's rating decision came through 9 weeks later, restoring him to a 70% rating with 13 months of back pay. The mortgage was caught up. The foreclosure was stayed. Tommy Bellamy kept the house. And then, 3 weeks after the decision letter arrived, Michael Darrah called Karen Bellamy on her personal cell phone and told her that one of the supervisors who had helped expedite her father's case was, quote, asking about a gratuity, a thank you, something appropriate for the size of the back pay her father had just received. The number, this time, was $5,000. Karen Bellamy paid it. She paid it in cash in the same CVS parking lot in West Warwick on a Saturday afternoon in October of 2022. And then she drove home and sat in her car in her own driveway for 35 minutes before she went inside, and she did not tell her father where the money had gone. But she did not throw away the bank withdrawal slips, and she did not delete the text messages. She kept everything. The investigation that ended Michael Darrah's career did not begin with Karen Bellamy. It began, as these investigations often do, with a parallel matter, a routine audit of expedited claim decisions in the Providence regional office that flagged a statistical anomaly. Across a 3-year window, a disproportionate number of claims worked at Station 314 had moved from development to rating decision faster than the regional average. Significantly faster. The audit office in Washington noticed. They forwarded the data to the VA Office of Inspector General. The OIG opened a preliminary inquiry in January of 2023. The inquiry sat at a low burn for 4 months. Investigators pulled claim files. They reviewed rating decisions. They cross-referenced the names of veterans whose claims had been worked by Darrah against complaint records, congressional inquiry logs, and the VA's internal hotline reports. They found nothing actionable until April of 2023, when a different veteran in southeastern Massachusetts, not Ortiz, not Whitcomb, not Bellamy, walked into a VA medical center in Brockton and told a social worker, almost in passing, that he had been asked for money by a benefits representative the previous year and had refused. The social worker reported it. The complaint reached the OIG within 72 hours. Federal agents from the FBI's Boston field office and the VA OIG opened a joint investigation under Title 18 of the United States Code, Section 201 and Section 1951, bribery of a public official, and the Hobbs Act. The first interview was with Daniel Ortiz. Ortiz, confronted at his kitchen table in Fall River with a financial review of his account that showed an $18,000 back pay deposit, followed almost immediately by a $3,000 cash withdrawal he could not explain, told investigators the entire story in a recorded interview that lasted 4 hours. The second interview was with Raymond Whitcomb, who described the $16,000 payment in 3 installments and the rating bump from 30 to 70. Whitcomb produced a notebook he had kept during the period, with dates, dollar amounts, and the locations where he had handed Darrah envelopes. 2 Dunkin' Donuts parking lots, 1 rest area on Interstate 95, and 1 Cumberland Farms in East Providence. The third interview was with Karen Bellamy, who handed over her bank withdrawal slips and her text messages, including one from Darrah's personal cell phone that read, "Tell your father the supervisor was very generous with the rating. Something appropriate would be remembered." That was the case. 3 veterans, a pattern, a paper trail, and a fabricated chain of inside men, the supervisors, the schedulers, the raters, none of whom existed. The gift cards Darrah had spent 3 years invoking had never been purchased. The money had gone, every dollar of it, into Michael Darrah's own personal checking account at Citizens Bank, deposited in cash in small enough increments to avoid the $10,000 currency transaction reporting threshold. In September of 2023, federal agents executed simultaneous search warrants on Darrah's home in Taunton, his vehicle, and his work cubicle at the Providence Regional Office. They seized his personal cell phone, 2 laptops, a banking ledger he had kept in a desk drawer, and approximately $11,000 in cash from a shoebox on the top shelf of his bedroom closet. The cubicle search produced printed copies of 3 veterans' rating decisions, Ortiz, Whitcomb, and Bellamy, kept in a manila folder separate from official VA records, as if Darrah had been maintaining his own internal ledger of which claims had paid him and which had not. And then they made one more phone call. A call to a VA OIG agent in Washington who specialized in witness tampering cases. Because between April and August of 2023, while the investigation was active and Darrah did not yet know he was its target, he had been calling some of the veterans whose claims he had handled, asking how they were doing, asking whether anyone had contacted them, suggesting that if anyone did contact them, they remember that the gift cards had really been for other employees, and the whole thing had been a, quote, misunderstanding. Those calls were being recorded by 2 of the veterans on the other end of the line, at the request of federal agents who had already turned them. On the morning of September 20th, 2023, at 6:15 a.m., federal agents knocked on the front door of the Darrah home on a quiet cul-de-sac in Taunton. Michael Darrah answered the door in a gray Brockton Police Athletic League t-shirt and gym shorts, holding a coffee mug in one hand and a cordless landline phone in the other. His wife was upstairs. His daughters, 15 and 13, were getting ready for school. The lead agent was Special Agent Patricia Hennessy of the FBI's Boston field office. She had been working the case for 5 months. She had spoken to all 3 primary victims. She had read the text messages, listened to the recorded calls, and reviewed every cash deposit on the citizen's bank statement. Hennessy: Mr. Darrah, we have a federal search warrant for this residence and a separate warrant for your vehicle and your workstation. Step outside, please, sir. Darrah: What is this about? What is happening? Hennessy: I think you have a pretty good idea, Mr. Darrah. Darrah: I want to call my lawyer. Hennessy: You can do that. You are not under arrest right now. But I want you to understand something before you make that call. We have spoken to Mr. Ortiz. We have spoken to Mr. Whitcomb. We have spoken to Karen Bellamy. We have the text messages. We have the recordings of your phone calls from this past summer. He did not answer. Hennessy: Was there ever a supervisor? Was there ever a scheduler? Was there ever a single VA employee who got a single gift card from a single dollar of any of that money? He looked at her. He looked at the 4 agents behind her on the lawn. He looked back into his own house at the staircase, where his older daughter had just appeared on the landing in her school uniform, watching from the 2nd floor with one hand on the banister and her backpack already over her shoulder. And then Michael Darrah, former Brockton police officer and Veterans Service Representative GS-11 at the United States Department of Veterans Affairs, said the only true thing he had said about this case to any law enforcement officer. Darrah: I want my lawyer. He did not say another word for the rest of the morning. A federal grand jury in the District of Rhode Island returned a 6-count indictment against Michael Darrah on November 14, 2023. 3 counts of bribery of a public official under Title 18, Section 201. 1 count of extortion under color of official right pursuant to the Hobbs Act. 1 count of receipt of an illegal gratuity by a public official. And 1 count of witness tampering for the phone calls he had made during the active investigation, attempting to coordinate stories with the veterans he had extorted. He was arraigned in federal court in Providence on December 5, 2023, and released on a $50,000 unsecured bond. His Brockton Police Department pension was suspended pending the outcome of the case. His VA employment was terminated by letter the same week. His wife filed for divorce in March of 2024 and moved with both daughters to her parents' house in Bridgewater. The case dragged through 19 months of pretrial motions. The defense, led by a Providence attorney named Kevin McLaughlin, filed a motion to suppress the recorded phone calls. The motion was denied. They filed a motion to sever the witness tampering count from the bribery counts on the grounds of prejudicial joinder. That motion was denied. They filed a motion challenging the sufficiency of the indictment on the gratuity count. Denied. On July 9, 2025, in Courtroom 2 of the John O. Pastore Federal Building on Kennedy Plaza in Providence, Michael Darrah stood at the defense table and entered a plea of guilty to all 6 counts of the indictment. The plea agreement included an acknowledgement of every payment, every text message, every fabricated reference to non-existent VA employees and non-existent gift cards, and an agreement to pay restitution to the 3 named victims in the total amount of $29,651. Sentencing was scheduled for March of 2026. The pre-sentence report described Darrah as a former law enforcement officer with no prior criminal history, a stable upbringing, and a documented financial pressure stemming from his younger daughter's cardiac care. The government's sentencing memorandum requested a term of incarceration in the upper end of the federal sentencing guidelines for the offense level between 60 and 78 months. The defense memorandum requested a downward variance to 24 months, citing cooperation, acceptance of responsibility, and the defendant's role as the primary financial support for 2 minor children with significant medical needs. The victim impact statements were read into the record on the morning of the sentencing hearing. Daniel Ortiz spoke first. He said he had served his country and waited 14 months for benefits he had earned, and that being told the only way to get them was to pay a man in a parking lot had broken something in him he did not yet know how to fix. Raymond Whitcomb spoke second. He said he had paid Michael Darrah $16,000 he did not have, borrowing against his daughter's college account, because he had been convinced it was the only way the system would ever work for someone like him. Karen Bellamy spoke last. She did not cry. She said her father was sitting in the gallery behind her, in the same house he had nearly lost, and that he had asked her to deliver one sentence to the court. She turned and looked directly at Michael Darrah at the defense table, and she did not look away. Bellamy, my father asked me to tell you that the worst part was not the money. The worst part was that you knew he was about to lose his house, and you asked for more. The judge, the Honorable Margaret Holcomb of the United States District Court for the District of Rhode Island, sentenced Michael Darrah to 54 months in federal prison, 3 years of supervised release, and restitution in the full charged amount. She remanded him into custody at the conclusion of the hearing. He was processed into Federal Correctional Institution Devens, a medium-security facility in Ayer, Massachusetts, 40 miles north of the city where he had grown up. His projected release date is in 2030. Tommy Bellamy still lives in the small ranch house on the cul-de-sac in Coventry. Karen Bellamy still drives past the CVS off Quaker Lane on her way to work at the hospice. She does not park there anymore. This case was personal in a way most are not, but the next one, right-hand side of your screen, somehow finds a way to be worse.